Hi, 4th grade percussionist, and thank you for checking out this YouTube video. In this video, we're going to be working on Bugler's Dream, and we're going to really work on the beginning all the way to measure 17. So if you're snare drum and bass drum, this will be useful for you. If you're looking for the bells part, you can also check out the flute video that is the same song. It will go through the same notes as the keyboard percussion would normally do. So that's the best thing I can send you with right now, since I don't have a keyboard at home to be able to play along with you. So for right here, this video is snare drum and bass drum for Bugler's Dream. So we're going to start right at the beginning. You're going to notice I have kind of like this makeshift setup where I have my practice pad, I'm sitting on a box here, and I have my drumsticks. However you can make it work while you're practicing at home will be helpful and useful. So I know most of you have your percussion kits, so that'll be really useful to set up your stand and set up your snare drum and bass drum on the stand. You'll have a better situation than even I have here. So here we go. We're going to start right at the beginning, and there are only two instruments that start at the beginning of Bugler's Dream, and that would be trumpet and snare drum. Bass drum doesn't come until later, about 5 measures in. So we're looking at the snare drum part right to start, and you're going to notice that you're going to have a lot of notes at the beginning. You have, and I'm going to actually pull it up so you can see. So here is the snare drum part. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to use my finger to kind of point here. Here's the beginning. So you're going to have a lot of quarter notes and actually a lot of what we call our eighth notes. And I know we haven't worked on eighth notes too much in our lessons yet, but they're not as hard or difficult as they may seem or they may look. They actually are pretty easy. We've worked on it a lot in general music. You've worked on it in instrumental music class with me before. You've worked on it probably a lot with Miss Harpence. Now there are two ways that we can count eighth notes. So a quarter note we might say ta, or we might use a counting and say number 1. So for our snare drum part here, we would say at the beginning, we might say that's on beat 1, and then here you have these notes that are eighth notes, and you might have it on beat 2, and we would say them as TTs, or you can call it, since it's on beat 2, and call it 2 and. So we have this rhythm where we're going 1, 2, and 3, 4 and you could say that too as ta, t, ta, t. You're going to notice throughout the rest of the song you have a lot of those eighth notes, so we can count those out and practice them together. So when we're looking at the first 4 measures of Bugler's Dream for just snare drum, we're going to say that counting, and I'm going to use counting. You can use tas and tts if you'd like, but I'm going to start out here and just count along, and you can airplay if you'd want to. So measures 1 to measure 4, just in the snare drum part. So right at the beginning, we'll count us in. 1, 2, here's the beginning. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and. Now you can clap along with that rhythm too, that'll help you, and now we're actually going to try playing that rhythm. So right from measure 1, we're going to play that rhythm. Again, you can use tas and tts, or you can say it 1, 2, and use counting like I do. So I will count it out again while we're playing on the snare drum. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and go. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and. So that's just beginning to measure 4 for snare drum. And here at measure 5 is actually where the rest of the band comes in. You'll include keyboard percussion, flutes, clarinets, saxophones, trumpets, and low brass come in as well as the bass drum. So we're going to look at that bass drum part really quick at this. So if you have your snare drum pad and your stick, you're just going to use one stick and your snare drum pad if you're playing on bass drum. I know you don't probably have a bass drum at home while you're trying to practice. So in your bass drum part, remember the bass drum part sits on the bottom half of the staff, where you have the same piece of music as the snare drum. The snare drum reads the top part, bass drum reads the bottom part. So for bass drum, you play mostly just quarter notes. You don't have to worry about eighth notes in this one. But let's look at that from measures 5 to measures 8. So in Bugler's Dream, for bass drum, you play in measure 5, you come in on beat 1, and then you rest on beat 2, and then play on beat 3, rest on beat 4. And we're actually going to go through and we're going to count that rhythm from all the way from measures 5 to measure 8. So let's count and clap that as we do that from measure 5. I'll count us in. 1, 2, ready, and go, and 1, rest, 3, rest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, rest, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, rest. So again, if you want to try that playing like you're pretending you're playing on a bass drum, take your practice pad and take your sticks. We're going to do the same exact thing and play that bass drum part. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was measures 5 through measure 8 just for bass drum. Now look at that same thing but for the snare drum. So if you're a snare drum player, look at your part. From measure 5 to measure 8, you have something that's kind of similar to what you actually just played in measures 1 through 4. The only thing that's different is the measure 8 is different from measure 4. So let's count and clap that rhythm from measure 5 to measure 8 for the snare drum part. 1, 2, ready, and go. 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3. 4. So you only rest on that beat 4 in measure 8. So let's try that in playing. 1, 2, measure 5. 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. Now, going on to measure 9, the bass drum actually kind of takes a break there for a minute, and the bass drum doesn't come back until a measure 11 and 12. You kind of play along with the brass when you take 2 measures off and then come back in. Snare drum keeps playing the entire time. So let's look at measures 9 all the way to 17. We're going to count that part and clap it just for snare drum. 1, 2, measure 9, and go. 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4. 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and that takes us up to measure 17. You're going to notice that a lot of it repeats and stays the same. So really, once you learn almost 4 measures of the song, you learn almost the entire song. So now we're going to play the snare drum part from measures 9 to 17. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and go. 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4. Whoa, man, I made a mistake. Sorry, I took my eyes off the music. Here is measure 13. Ready, and go. 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3. 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and that takes us up to measure 17. So again, bass drum doesn't come in until measures 11 and 12, and you just kind of play a little bit of on 1 and 3, and then you play measure 12, 1, 2, 3, and the same thing at measure 15 and 16 a little bit. You play at 15, you play on beats 1 and 3, and then at 16 you play on beats 1, and then 3 and 4. So, hopefully this video helps you while you're practicing at home, and hopefully you're staying safe and staying healthy, and we hope to see you soon. See ya!